Instructive says that fool has no enemies. And the moment I read this, I mean, there's like billion thoughts rush through my head. Fool has no enemies. The fool has no enemies. And this is an old saying. Hang on, let me. Did you pull out that mic?
Yeah.
Does anyone have any wild guesses why a fool would have no enemies?
Because he cannot harm anyone. He cannot
Fool
make plans.
cannot harm anyone.
Because he believes everything?
No
Say it
competition.
again?
Because he believes everything?
Believes everything. Yeah, that's a good one.
He's
Actually, that's very, very close. That's actually, wow. I'll come back to that. Thank you.
He's unconscious, conscious about the nature of the world.
Okay, but how does that make him or her have no enemies?
He has no competition.
No competition.
Well, I mean,
I'm the dumbest guy.
I thought you were competing with him.
I mean, a fool has enemies. He just not aware of it.
It just doesn't know. Okay. Yes.
But a fool doesn't really care, so he's not aware that he has enemies because he really doesn't care because he's always joking around.
Okay. All right. All right. So let me get serious now. Thank you for all the contributions. Yeah, the saying actually addresses a very important philosophical point. That is that fool does not have a stand on anything. In other words, a fool does not have... Actually, before I reveal this, what's the opposite of arbitrary?
Certain.
Certain. Okay, that's a good word.
Specific.
Specific, okay, anything else?
Motivated.
Opposite of arbitrary, huh?
Known.
It has a motivation.
Known.
Meaningful?
Meaningful. That's more like a synonym.
Intentional.
Intentional. Almost, I'd say, but not precisely. Obligatory. No, because arbitrary can be obligatory too. Certain. Someone said certain, specific, certain, specific.
Actual.
Actual. Arbitrary can also be actual. So, anyways, the fool would have an arbitrary position towards things. In other words, one moment is, and the other moment it isn't. Whereas someone who's a little above the level of a fool would have a position. Would have a position at least on some things. And as soon as you have a position, even if it's like a very, very basic position, such as, I don't know, the color of the wall is, and then we could now fight over it. What's exactly the color of? I remember as a kid once we fought over which bike is better, the mountain bike or the what you call the racing bike.
Street bike?
BMX.
Huh?
The BMX.
It's one of those foolish things like what's better, pears or strawberries, what's better? What a question. So as soon as you have a position on anything, let alone having a position on what's the identity of the self, what is this world for, what's our position in it, you're bound to have so-called enemies. In other words, people who are going to oppose that. And therefore it said that fool has no enemies. Because fool has no position on anything. It's simply like on automatic pilot just floating about. I guess a side note, we shouldn't take too serious when people, politicians and so on have heated arguments and so on. So the reason I'm saying this is that in modern American ethos, it's considered inappropriate to discriminate. Yet it is impossible not to discriminate. We all discriminate. Like, let's say I have a position. Let's say I have a position which is, let's say that my position is, I want the ocean to be clean. That's my position. And then people who make it messy are people who actually oppose my plan. And therefore we would have a contention right there. I mean, now the question is what the nature of the contention would be, how intense, and so on and so forth. But as soon as you have a position, you'll have an opposition. You'll have so-called enemy. So therefore, discrimination is, you cannot live without discriminating. You cannot live without discriminating. And therefore there is, ultimately, there is good and there is bad. There is such a thing as good and there is such a thing as bad. As soon as you say that something is good, as soon as you say that, that must mean that there is bad as well. Let's say, I don't know, physically hurting people is bad. Therefore there must be good. Or if you start with a good position, there will be bad position too. And therefore discrimination is a must. Now, anyone disagrees thus far? All right. Love when everyone agrees.
I think in this country, when they use the word discrimination, they mean against. Discrimination against.
I am discriminating against. Let's say,
well, I mean,
let's say
like,
that I become very abusive now against you. You would not like it. And you would discriminate against me, and rightly so. So, discrimination is okay. As a matter of fact, everyone discriminates. Even people who say don't discriminate by saying that. So discrimination is impossible to avoid. Now we'll come to the point: what's proper discrimination?
Well, there could be incorrect discrimination.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. So we're getting there. But people generally say that as soon as you make a gradation, this is better or this is worse, people tend to jump and say don't discriminate. But discrimination is a must. Okay. So now that we've established this, as I was reading this, I was reading one book and then I read another book. So as I ended this book by reading The Fool Has No Enemies, and I continued reading for a few more paragraphs, gave it a whole lot of thought, pretty much the whole flight. Then I was on a plane. Then I opened this other book. Then this other book talked about broad-minded and narrow-minded people. It's like, wow, this is discrimination here, And so what's the term for narrow-minded person is what is it? Mahatma and Duratma. Atma means a person, a soul, self, and Dur means like constricted, like narrow-minded person. And then Mahatma means broad-minded, great, broad-minded, Catholic, open, universal. Okay. So then he said that the narrow-minded person is characterized by pronounced awareness of one's own needs. Everyone follows? In other words, narrow-minded person is so much aware of one's own needs, so much so that becomes selfish. And then the activities that expand from this kind of consciousness, even if they become altruistic, even if they become nationalism, well, nowadays nationalism is sort of looked down upon, but a few years ago it was still considered okay. Where you stand up for a country or like this. This is considered. This is because it's born out of selfishness, becomes extended selfishness. Like for example, why do I stand behind my family? Or let me pick something that's a little less controversial. Why do I stand behind my club? You know, why do I support my club? Why am I so intensely absorbed in the benefit of my club? Because it is darn my club. So my needs are pronounced, and then when I extend this selfishness, you know, the grossest form is when it's very, very concentrated. It's just me, but then extends a little more me and mine, my friends, my family, my nation. You know what, and it keeps on extending. But me remains in the center because it serves my needs. And then the only way, the book continued to elaborate upon this, the only way to shift oneself from the position of Duratma, or narrow-minded, towards Mahatma, or broad-minded, was by having a spiritual realization. Spiritual realization transcends the boundaries of physical limitations. Like one physical limitation is, as soon as I pass the borders of my physical body, that's not me anymore. So to hell with it. I mean, maybe not to hell, but it's but first, you know, first things over on this side of the border. But hey, who decided where the border is? I mean, it's just a pile of matter, and beyond it, there's also just a pile of matter. Some or other, I have decided pretty much arbitrarily that the border is right there where my hand ends. The spiritual consciousness actually unifies everything and everyone on a common ground. That there is something that we, all of us, objectively have in common. Because materially, no one and nothing is equal. Like they talk about, you know, equal opportunity, equal rights, equal. But equal on the basis of what?
Of the self, only for yourself.
Yeah. If you don't bring in the soul, how are we equal? Can someone tell me how are we equal?
Well, there used to be creed-based
All right,
discrimination.
so is that correct?
Yeah, creed and gender.
But do you agree with that kind of discrimination? Do you think that's good discrimination?
Creed and sex, gender.
Yeah.
Well, you know, no, you know, I guess, you know, it's not really. I'm not in charge of the country or something. You know,
I mean,
if
previously.
that's what the
Hang
law
on,
is.
hang on. Sorry, but I have a program here running. Not too long ago, you know, in this country, just because your skin was of a different color, they would hang you for fun. For fun, they would hang you. How about if, you know, what if the roles were reversed? How about if you were the one who were prosecuted just because you were of a whiter skin? Anyways, so what I'm trying to say is that unless, as the book postulated, that unless you come to the point of spiritual realization, no matter what kind of morality you may claim, you're going to remain an immoral person by the philosophy that you deeply psychologically believe in. And this is that my identity is physical, and you know my values are based upon it. And therefore, as long as one is in that kind of consciousness, one is going to remain selfish, or concentrated selfish, or extended selfish, but selfish, which is the root cause of all evil. Does anyone know how Panama Canal was built? Does anyone know how did the war in Iraq begin? No one really.
Blaming.
Huh?
Blaming.
No, it was before that. Before the weapons of mass destruction.
Something about
Fairy tale.
greed
Huh?
for money and oil.
What's that?
Like greed for money and oil.
Yeah, of course. What else? But
Specifically, I think it had something to do with
Kuwait.
a no-bid contract for oil monopoly.
Yeah. Anyways, but
Something like
I just threw in two examples. Two examples in our history, and I'll end here. I'll just like should I even say it? Okay, I will. Anyways, Kuwait, for example. What's that guy's name? Saddam Hussein. Am I pronouncing that right? I don't want to say his name in an American.
Saddam.
Yeah, he was an American ally. I mean, Americans were funding this guy, giving him weapons and all this, that, the other thing, and he several times attempted to invade Iran, and after not being successful, he thought, let me now do the same thing with Kuwait. And he went down there, and he thought that Americans would let him do it. When I say Americans, I don't mean you people. I mean the corporation, the business called the government that runs the show. Okay, and but he was wrong, because Kuwait had a very intimate relationship with American business. They were allowing American businesses, oil companies, to get their oil at a very, very decent price. And immediately America reacted. And that's when the war in Iraq began. And then excuses pulled up this, that, the other thing, and weapons of mass destruction, fairy tales, and all these kind of things for people who watch Fox TV. What is it?
Touché.
Yeah, and the Panama Canal. Panama was one country, was Colombia, and then it was an occupied country. It was a Spanish colony. So when the Spanish left, these guys were trying to organize themselves. And then in one point, Colombia wanted to dig a canal there and earn enormous amounts of money, for every boat passing through there instead of going all around. And then American government employed their own army for God knows how many times they did that. And secret army, this, that, the other thing, police, and helped the little rebel army there, and made the split in the Colombian government and population, and then stood on the side of the rebels, and they struck a deal with them. Look, we're going to support you, but you let us use this canal. And then maybe they're still getting money out of that canal, American companies. And all this comes from this very same idea, Duratma and Mahatma. So it is actually very important that we understand this, because every one of us is responsible not to be a Duratma. Dur also means ugly, also means difficult.
I know a quote from Albert Einstein is kind of like that.
Yeah, shoot it.
Great souls have often encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Yeah, that's a
Duratma is
good
like
one.
the mediocre.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a good one.